the Everything But Politics podcast.
Another week, another episode of the Everything But Politics podcast. And what an episode we have in store today. Joining us is the go-to vocal coach in the entertainment industry, as well as author of A Better Voice, the great Valerie Morehouse.
Hello. Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
joining
joining
us.
us. Absolutely. Valerie, before we really get into the thick of it, your career, what you do, your upbringing, why don't you give our listeners some background into who Valerie Morehouse is and perhaps a bit more context in what you specialize in?
Yeah. So I'm a vocal coach. I like to think of myself more as a vocal technician. I've been doing it for 28 years, but I've been in the music business for 35. And I've always been a singer. I've sung as long as I can remember, did all the musicals and things like that. And then I got a scholarship to go to Chapman University out here for the opera department. Not really something I wanted to do, just something that I could do. And I had nodes. I got vocal nodes when I was in high school. So I was probably about 17 years old. Didn't really know what that was at the time. It was the 80s. And it was very scary because we didn't have computers yet. So there were no lasers. They didn't exist. Like doctors were doing things with scalpels. And it was very, very scary. And it's how a lot of singers have then since messed up their instruments. So I ended up having to move to Japan for the summer. I taught English and music to Japanese students, and I just sat quiet because I didn't really know the language. And so I learned it the best that I could to get around the city. And I dove into pathology and I dove into books and I dove into anything I could get my hands on to sort of help myself. I found the speech therapists not to be overly helpful because the problem is they didn't really understand the singer. They were helping people with vocal trauma and vocal disorders, but they didn't really deal with real singers with powerful voices. And so, cut two, I graduate college and I was still performing and I got a job in the music business. I ended up working for Maverick Records, which was a Madonna's label. And I did that and worked on a bunch of, albums and records. We did Deftones, Alanis Morissette, Michelle Cello. I worked on Shania Twain and John Mellencamp, Motley Crue, The Prodigy, everything you can think of from like, contemporary music to death metal. And I learned a lot through that process, but I just started teaching. And one thing that I learned in the music business is I understood that I just didn't want to tour. I didn't want to be a touring artist myself. I didn't want that lifestyle. I saw what it looked like. It was very terrifying to me. And then I also saw when Napster hit, before you guys were probably all born, it was a very scary time because we had still had dial up. But the problem was I was thinking to myself, this is crazy. These artists are going to have to perform live all the time, but there's no walking into a store and buying a CD for $16.99 rather. They're going to have to find their revenue in other ways. So cut two, people were they were pirating music, but streaming didn't really exist yet. So it was a very weird time in the music business, and I predicted that these singers were really going to die on the vine because they didn't know how to work like athletes. They weren't doing the shows at the level that they're doing them now. I had a couple of tours last year. We did over 100 shows. That's a lot of singing.
Yeah.
And so that became very worrisome. And the collision of me not wanting to be an artist myself, I just saw the lifestyle and I was like, I'm out. I don't really want to do this. But I also didn't really see myself as a teacher. It was quite wild. I'm like, I'm not going to teach singers. I'm like the cat lady is what you used to think of for vocal coaches. So, I as I got more and more into it and people asked me to train their kids, I actually had a propensity for it and I really enjoyed it. And I took the things that I had learned myself about my own vocal journey, having nodes and actually healing myself. And I started meeting with all the surgeons in LA. And I said, well, who's seeing all the celebrities? I want to know those guys. And so I must have been 26 at the time, 27. And I was kind of making my way out of the music industry. Didn't want to do that either. Was soul sucking. And so I trailblazed this path to kind of heal artists. And the more and more I did it, the more and more I realized that there was nobody doing what I was doing at that time. It was like 1998. And we had a lot of vocal coaches, but we didn't have a lot of technicians that really understood rehab. We had speech therapists that were working with regular patients that were just learning how to speak again, but we really didn't have a technician that was working super closely with the surgeons. And so I feel like I trailblazed that path at a very young age and said, listen, if I'm going to do this, I got to be the biggest vocal coach on the planet. Like, I'm going to work with huge singers. I'm going to change their lives. I'm going to get them back on stage and I'm going to learn everything that I can possibly learn about their voices, my voices, anatomy. I'm going to align myself with all the surgeons and we're going to become a power couples. And we did. And we did exactly that. And I walked out of the music business at 28 years old. I was done. And I was, like I said, just trailblazing this path of being a technician. And the more and more I focused on just that one thing, I think too many people wear too many hats.
That's
People
awesome.
are trying to do too many things now. They're not focused. And then there's a problem with not being focused. I chose what I was going to do. I made a decision and that was my path. And once I made that decision, it was all cylinders were on go. And I ended up just getting more and more clients and getting TV shows, and my career just kind of took off from there. And now I've been doing it at this level for 28 years.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. And if I'm not mistaken, your story began in England. Is that correct?
Did.
Now, I don't hear much of an English accent. Where did it go?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I came back from England in 1980. So I was still quite young, I was 10. And I had a very posh accent. And I think at 14, 15, it's pretty cool to be different. At 10, 11, not so cool. And I was also acting and I was doing plays and theater and musicals. And so I had to learn American roles. It was very important for me at that age to get rid of my accent. So I tried very, very hard to get rid of my accent. And I ended up getting fully rid of it, I would say, by the time I was 14. But if you send me back to the UK for more than a few days, I'm struggling not to use it.
So funny.
So people call that a case of the Madonnas, but it's not really because I was actually raised there, and it's almost like I have a friend who's an opera singer. She's from New Zealand, and but she's also been here since she was in her 20s, maybe early 20s. So a long time now. And so she goes back and forth in between her American accent and her Kiwi accent. And so when
Interesting.
she's with someone she's comfortable with, you'll hear her Kiwi accent come out. But when she's uncomfortable and she doesn't know you, she speaks with an American accent. And so it's almost like a language, but it's just an accent. We can waffle back and forth when we need to and pull it out when we need to, or if we want to.
So Valerie, I'm someone I wouldn't consider myself a singer, but I like to sing for fun. Couldn't tell you if I'm singing correctly or incorrectly. If I joined you and you were my teacher, what would be like the first things we would work on?
We would work on something called a five-tone ah, which is a basic ba da 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 scale. We'd be
Okay.
checking for pitch. We'd find out what is your pitch like? Are you off key? Are you on key? Are you struggling with these scales? Do you have any vibrato in your voice? We would be looking at your musicality and your athleticism. So I always tell singers, you guys are not singers and rock stars anymore. Pop stars are athletes.
I love that, by the way.
You have to work like an athlete. So I always put my money where my mouth is, and
Mhm.
I'm a runner, I'm a lifter, I do Pilates 3 days a week. Everything's about being strong and being fit, and you have to have a strong, fit voice. And so if you're out of practice, you're dealing with muscles that are sitting inside your vocal box. They're two white bands of muscle. They're very strong when used correctly, and they get very weak when used incorrectly. So you can have a great voice, but you can blow it out in one show because you're singing hard, not smart. You're not being technical. It's just like an athlete. You watch the guy run all over the court, and you're like, "Dang, that kid is fast and he can jump." But a coach gets in there and says, "Oh my God, he's going to kill himself. He's going to bust his
Yeah.
knee. He's going to roll his ankle because his form's totally out." So what I do is I take some of the best singers in the world and retool them and make them bionic. So we don't take away anything magical about their voice, but we make them bionic so they understand the anatomy and how to use their voice. And I would say that Nine times out of 10, I get new clients who said, oh, I've had voice my whole life and they're looking for a change. I ask them three basic questions. They have no clue what I'm talking about. They don't know what their vocal cords are made of. They don't know where they are. They don't know what their strap muscles are. They don't understand their larynx and the anatomy of that. They don't know what the bridges are, breaks are, modifying vowels. All that stuff has to be taught. And I find a lot of teachers don't teach. They actually just mimic. And they give you a bunch of exercises that they gave five other people before you. So they're not really cultivating your organic voice, right? So
Yep.
we need to find your organic voice. It's one of the reasons I don't sell warm-ups. I never have and never will, because it's like a doctor writing a prescription for a patient they've never seen.
Copy.
Well said.
So throughout the book, countlessly you mentioned SPA, sound producing anatomy. Can you give us a rundown on what exactly SPA is?
Yeah. So SPA is an acronym for sound producing anatomy. It's something that I came up with when I wrote the book because I've read so many books on the voice and it never really describes what the voice is. The voice is very elusive if you don't know what you're doing. So I wanted a word to encapsulate the sound producing anatomy and what that is. It's basically, we have chest voice, we have mixed voice, and we have head voice. It's like living room, dining room, kitchen. And what you're trying to do as a singer is when you have a verse and a chorus, a bridge, right, gets a little higher. The goal is to bypass the strap muscles in the neck. Even though the chords sit here, you want to bypass this and you want to jump just as strong from chest into mixed voice. It's a big jump, right? So you mean to be resonating from your face and then you feel a little higher in your head. So you want those three compartments, just like a science beaker with a neck and another with a neck and another, right? You want those three things to be working the sound producing anatomy as a whole, as a unit, instead of disjointed. You'll hear a lot of singers and they'll sing the verse and they get to the chorus and they don't know what to do. They're either screaming to get the notes out because they don't know how to move properly from chest to mix, or they're flipping into head voice, which sounds really weak and disjointed. And so the biggest thing we want to teach singers is mixed voice. It's the hardest thing to master, and it's also the hardest thing to teach. So you'll hear a lot of singers will come from other coaches or left to their own devices, and they have a terrible mixed voice. The mixed voice is for power and getting rid of vocal breaks where you hear the singer struggling. You don't ever want to hear the singer struggle. They should be able to go from bottom to top, totally smooth, and you should hear no velocity change and no power change. It's like a treble and bass or a woofer and tweeter on a bass and treble, like two speakers. You want to be able to turn the knobs to the middle and have everything blending instead of one way up and one way down. There's nothing worse than being in your car and you've got too much treble or too much buh, 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 right? Unless you enjoy that sound. You want a balanced sound when you're listening to your music. Well, when you sing, my job is to tweak the knobs in your instrument to make sure you're always at the center. Does that make sense?
It does. So when you're teaching your clients about chest, mix, head, it's one thing to practice it with you and be conscious of the technicalities, but when it comes to performance, how do you ensure that you got to put the technicalities aside and kind of find yourself in that flow state?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do, because I always say the warm-ups are not mutually exclusive to the performance. Because when you do, it's very astute actually, because when I do have a client performing, I want them to have it downloaded into their body and I want them to leave it there and I want them to go on stage and just perform and let go. And it needs to be automatic. Again, like athletics. If you think too much during a game, you're in trouble. It's like I have two twin boys. They've always played sports. They're football players now, but they played baseball for a really long time. I have one who's he's very analytical, he's very bright, and he was a really good pitcher. But the one thing that he would do is instead of just throwing and sending the ball, he would try to outsmart the batter. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. He has high IQ, game IQ. That was good sometimes, and sometimes it was bad for him because he would try to outsmart and overthink the game. And so you have to understand when to do that. And my other son doesn't do that. He's just go, which is very dangerous, but also makes him an amazing athlete because he doesn't think, he just moves. You know what I mean? And so
I do.
I need both of those personalities, but you know when to manage those. But you do want to download your practices as an athlete in the body so that when you hit the court or you hit the field, whatever that sport is, it's just in you. And that's the same as singers.
So Valerie, I've noticed sometimes listening to some people sing and kind of listening to if they have it naturally or not. Like some people have like a natural pitch. I'm sure you've encountered musicians who, when they sing for the first couple of times, they're just right in pitch. And then there are some people who are not. What do you think, or what do you think makes that happen?
Well, that's a couple of things. People always are shocked by this, but I think it's the stats are something like 2 to 3% of people in the world are actually tone deaf. Most people can be taught pitch and tone. It's called ear training. Now, is that what I want to be doing with my time all day? Not at this juncture in my career. My associates might get those people, have a little bit more patience for it, but you can teach pitch. You can teach it. And what happens is you have some singers too, they hear it going in, but they can't output it. So they're like, I know I'm off key. But the reason that they're struggling singing on key is that the anatomy is so messed up. The chords aren't functioning properly as muscles, and so they pop out the wrong key. It's like a little flat or a little sharp because
Mm-hmm.
their anatomy is not working properly, right? And so you have to figure out which person you have in front of you first. And so when you're working with somebody that you feel might be tone deaf, it's really a matter of like, can they get close? Can you do like bum? Can they go bum? I'm flat, right? So they're a little off, and you keep hitting the bum. Little vibrato might keep them on pitch.
Mm-hmm.
You can find out how much the ear is going out.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, in all of my years of training, I've really only encountered 3 people that were tone deaf. I mean, like where I was just said to them, look, I'm sorry, but you should play the guitar, play keys. It's not your thing.
Yeah, it's not
And
for
it's never going
everyone.
to be your thing. And I won't take your money. I don't want to take your money. Like spend it on something that you can have access and expertise to or
That's
with.
funny.
But a lot of people can be trained. It just the patience of the teacher too.
How, So interesting. How do you find most of your clients? Is it all people in the industry? Do record labels come to you, or do you also have like just like independent artists come to you, or how does that work?
So my clients are all referral. They always have been. The one thing that I've never ever done is advertise. It's a very different. I mean, I've been doing this such a long time. It's way before, like before dial-up, if you can even imagine a world before dial-up. So I would go with flyers and I would go to coffee shops and I would drive to music stores with a business card and I would put it on their board. And that's kind of how I got started. And then it's really just word of mouth. I think if anything you do well, if you're a really good teacher, you're someone wants to spend a half an hour with, right?
Yeah,
And you're very trustworthy. I think those are the 3 things that you really need to be successful in anything that you do. You have to be
yeah,
really good at your job, and people have to be able to trust you, right? And so
absolutely.
most of
Definitely.
that just becomes referral and people having a really good experience with you. So now in my career, it's everywhere. It's online, it's Instagram, it's social media now because we have
Yeah,
new platforms. The majority of those people are probably not my clients. I have 2 associates that help me and work with me that are phenomenal. They'll take a little more of the overflow, but mine is record labels, mine's producers, mine's independent artists, mine's parents, people that just Google LA's top vocal coach or
yeah,
trains Olivia Rodrigo, who trains Lainey Wilson, who trains Shabuzi, whatever their thing is, they'll find me that way. And I think with social media too, you can find anyone online. I mean, I work with a company called Better Voice, and we use these little guys, which are great. I don't know if you've seen them. They look like a dog whistle. They have a little lever on them.
How's it work?
Well, it's back pressure. And so what we've done for years and years and years as teachers, we've used straws, different
mm,
size straws, and we put them in like a water bottle like this. We put it in and we blow. And what that does is it allows the vocal cords to move without anything in the neck getting in the way, which is what we want to do when we sing. So there's a guy out of Salt Lake City, Utah, Braden, who designed this. And he sent it to me and it sat on my desk for months because I was in tour season and people send me all kinds of junk all the time. I'm like, it's just another freaking straw. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. You know what I mean? So Um, I just picked it up one day and I used there's levers. There's like a lever and I don't know if you can see that because it's all black, but there's little
Yes.
Yep,
notches.
we see
And
it.
I put it on, like notch two. There's a little bit of an opening there. You see that little opening? The air goes through it. And when you have a song, let's say you have a song like Let It Be from the Beatles, you would go, right? And you would hum into it, not blow. We're not blowing because you're losing air.
Hmm.
And you hum into the trainer, it's like bench pressing weight, and you keep putting heavier plates on the bar.
Hmm.
If you can retain your form, we'll add weight. But if your back starts coming up and you're dumping into your back and your neck to lift that weight, we're going to take the plates off until
Wow.
your form is perfect. And this is how we build bionics. I started using it and my eyes bugged out. I was like, this is so cool. And I called him up and I said, I'm sure you have another brand ambassador for this thing already because it's been months and months. And he said, no, I'm waiting for you. So it's very
That's
sweet,
cool.
actually. And he said, you're my person. And I said, this thing's amazing. Please tell me you have a patent on it. He goes, I do. I said, perfect.
Wonderful.
But what we do is I use it with all my artists and we take their songs and their warm-ups and we just right out the gate. If I'm going, E and I'm pulling, or I'm going E and I'm flipping, it gets me to mix. So I use this in the morning or at any time of the day. I can feel my cords vibrating in the right spot. My spa is going from chest to mix and it's bypassing the neck muscle. I'm placed. Ah,
Wow.
keep going. As opposed to going or you're finding that mixed voice.
Hmm.
I want
And
to give
does
you a standing ovation. That was incredible.
and
And one of the things that you can do too, I do this like a running arpeggio. We'll go. Feel right where I'm supposed to be. Now, as you guys know, I'm coming off a pretty bad cold flu, so my voice is still mending. But you can take that, place it, back down to chest. And I'm not feeling, I'm not pulling, I'm not grabbing, I'm not feeling anything. I'm just using my
Hmm.
cords without any of the neck muscles getting in the way.
and on the vocal trainer, does the little lever control resistance?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, it controls back pressure. So if you think of there's something called inertance. You get it when you blow through the water and straw, but you really feel it. This just tightens it up. This is really for more of beginners can use it, but it's for advanced singers that need a little heavier plates on the bar.
Hmm.
Right. And it's how we get our singers there fast because they've got multiple shows to do. They've got, upwards of 5 shows a week.
Wow.
So, how old were you when you started singing?
So I basically popped out of the womb singing is what my parents would tell you. But um, I knew that I could sing when I lived in England. I picked up the guitar like 8 or 9 years old and I started like chords and playing and singing a little bit in school. And then as soon as I moved back to the States, I had a music teacher in grade school. I was in fourth grade, I want to say third or fourth, and they had asked us to sing. She had a pitchfork and she would find it. We were talking about pitch in music class, and I just kept nailing the pitch. She's like, "Oh my God, this is crazy." Like she's nailing. I was like 9 or 10. And then she'd ask me to sing a line and I'd repeat it perfectly. And then she'd give me something with vibrato. And like the whole class they're just like dying asleep. This is not
Yeah.
only did I have a British accent, but now I'm singing. So it was not very popular at the time to be doing that, right? There was a lot of teasing to be had. But she called my parents and she said, your daughter, I don't know if you know your daughter is a singer. And they said, well, we kind of know she's been doing it for a few years, but I don't think they really knew what it entailed. And then from there, as a young person, I was doing shows that only the seventh and eighth graders were allowed to do, right? Everybody was really angry, and I would get the lead. It's in sixth grade, and then I would go on to Mater Dei High School out here, where I studied in the chamber choir, and I'm the only freshman to have made it in that choir. It's a junior senior program. So high school was a little lonely for me because I had upper division lunch. My choir was when my lunch was with the freshmen and sophomores. And so, of course, I made friends with all the juniors and seniors, and then they graduated. So my senior year was very lonely. But I had friends in choir, and I would sing and I would do opera and I do pop. And then in high school, I was in a band and I used to study for finals in between sets. And we would play all cover music, and I was discovered, and then I couldn't do it because I got nodes, right? I was singing hard, not smart. And that's kind of where my journey began. And then I ended up getting an opera scholarship to Chapman, and I studied that. But it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I love contemporary music. So I think I've always known that I could sing. But I just popped out of the womb with this humongous voice and this vibrato, and my parents didn't really know where it came from because nobody in my family sings anyway.
Wow.
It's
While
amazing.
at Chapman, what did you envision for yourself in your career?
You know, I was a journalism major. So I was really into journalism, and I didn't even know when I was going to use it. I thought, oh, well, I could sing, I could be an artist, I could host, I could go into journalism. And then I kind of saw what the media looked like, and I was out pretty fast. I'm like, nah, I don't want to do this. But I was always very good on camera. Um, I just found that very natural for me. And I just think some people are natural born performers, really, right? And you either know you have something or you don't. And when I was at school, I definitely knew that I didn't want to sing opera. I knew that I wasn't going to go into that. I had a boyfriend in college that was a pretty skilled opera singer. He's a few years older, and there was a very famous opera singer, Carol Neblett, and a couple of others that I met, and they were doing a opera called Janiskiki. My boyfriend was the lead. He was the lead tenor, and he was singing with a female that was much, much older, like 25 years older. And they did this thing at the Long Beach Civic Light Opera, and we had a dinner after. And I just remember I was 19, and there was a small group of us, and I was only invited because my boyfriend was singing with them. And I said something about, being smaller and active and fit and athletic. And, she gave me one of the, hey, honey, with a body like that, just stick to aerobics. I got one of those, I'm like, that was pretty insulting. Okay, well, that's pretty rude, So I think I kind of knew very early on that was not my thing. And even though I sing classical music and I train opera singers now, most of my students are contemporary, which is pop, rock, heavy metal, hard rock, R&B, rappers, you name it, I have it. But I think at Chapman, I think I was still pretty confused. I wasn't sure where I was headed. And I didn't, I got a job in the music business right outside of school. I was 22 years old, so I was in the corporate side. And I think I was still kind of searching. I think I always knew that I was a performer, but I just didn't want the lifestyle of an artist.
Understood.
Fair
I
enough.
watch what
Yeah.
my artists go through now, and I'm like, phew, I dodged a bullet.
You've
So,
seen them. Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
I want to pivot for a moment. So we got Valerie, the musician, but I want to go towards Valerie, the entrepreneur. When you began all this, and now that you've been doing it for so long, you've been successful. For anyone listening that's looking to, build a business in such a competitive industry as you have, what is the most effective way to build credibility?
Oh man, slow and steady. Slow and
Always
steady.
wins the race.
I would tell you, generationally, things have changed a lot. You guys have a lot of advantages. You also have a lot of disadvantages. As I tell my teachers now, the market is so saturated with social media. It's very hard to get ahead. You had to have a lot of tenacity before social media. Social media helps you in many ways, but also hurts you because everybody's doing it, right? So saturated.
Exactly.
And I think you have to be patient. I've had a lot of people through the years, even before Instagram was a thing, it didn't even exist when we were all on flip phones. And there was a time when I would nurture other teachers. I have an amazing team now. And a lot of people steal from me. I had a lot of people would come in, and I would bring them up, and teach them about my business and teach them about training and teach them kind of everything that I knew, take them under my wing. I do everything. I pay for the studio. I pay for the rent. I pay the taxes. I pay the insurance. I pay the equipment. I did the sweat equity. So my people that work for me now, they very clearly understand that this is my business and you're lucky to be here. You're here by the grace of me, and you're going to make a lot more than you could ever make on your own for those reasons, because it's so saturated, whatever. And you're going to get to work with a caliber of clients you may never get to work with in your career, right? So just too many people, too many vocal coaches. How do we choose? I think as an entrepreneur, you have to learn to grow the business, but to choose very wisely. And I think perhaps in my younger, maybe my 30s and maybe even into my early 40s, um, you can get a little too trusting sometimes, and you can meet people that you think are going to be loyal and on the same page as you, and then right when you turn around and they feel like you've done what you need to do for them, they're out. They've stolen everything in the studio. They got all your clients. They said their computer broke and they're nowhere to be found. Right? That has happened to me.
Hmm.
So you have a lot of people that want to jump on the bandwagon, and I think it's choosing staff wisely, picking the right people and understanding that you can't have everything right now. I know a lot of my friends who are in corporate world, and they're maybe VPs at a label, or they work in TV and film, and they're executives now, and they have a lot of people underneath them, managers, assistants. And one of the things that we're seeing is such a sense of entitlement, and people just don't want to work. They're like, why do I have to go get you coffee? You're like, because you're new, and I had to do it, right? We all have to do it. And I think the thing is like, if you really love your job, you need to come in open and willing to learn from somebody that's done it, and put your ego aside for a minute and understand that it's a marathon, not a race. But if you're in a hurry to get to your outcome instead of being committed to your process, it's never going to work.
When did you join social media and how big has that been for your business?
Um, Boy, I want to say maybe not, I would say recently, which would be
Hmm.
probably 2017,
Okay.
2017, something like that. I was kind of late in the game. I was very reticent. Um, it's a love-hate for me. Um, I I like to teach, and I like to post things that are valuable. And I think it's a great vehicle. But I also think there's a lot of crap on there. So I want to make sure that what I put out is very pure and very organic. So I'd say, yeah, 2017. And it's been great for my teachers. It's been great for people that come, and once in a while you'll find, I'll get these like TikTokers or whatever. I've got someone who's got, I'm like, kid you not, she's got 35 million followers, which less than like one of my A-list
Mhm.
celebrities, right? Selling millions and millions of records. And how they got to that, God love them. But it's a very, unless you have something to back it up, it's a very short-lived reality, and it's not very sustainable. Right? You really have to have something, I think, an addendum to that. And I think you have to be very interesting, and you have to understand the business side of it. And to your question, I think one of the reasons I've been able to be successful is I do have the business acumen. My team will tell you I'm tough. I can be nice, but I can be really old school. If I see an email going out to a client, it's like, hey, no, 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 we're not doing that. You don't open up an email saying, hey. I am really, really strict for a reason. There's only certain things my teachers are allowed to post. Everything has to go through me, not to keep a managed handle on them, but to let them understand that we're dealing with massive clients. They have privacy laws and privacy rules. I've only signed maybe a few NDAs in my career because people trust me, which is great to have that. Everybody else on the team is signing an NDA. I don't really experience that as much. they just understand that you are trustworthy. And I think that's the biggest thing of, like I said earlier, about being an entrepreneur. You have to have the business acumen. You also have to be very, very good at what you do and very confident in what you do. And you have to keep learning. You can't get to a certain place and go, well, I'm not going to ask for help because I'm the person. I think the second somebody does that, you're in huge trouble. You always need to be growing with your career. Even if you've done it for 30 years, you need to put your ego aside and say, can I learn something from someone instead of being threatened by it? You have to be open to it. And I think that's what makes you a cut above in any
Yeah.
business. And then you also have to build trust, and that's slow and steady.
Totally. And
Va-
so I'm happy you mentioned that. So given you are, you're working with, superstars, whatever you want to call them, like sold millions and millions of records. How do you get them to understand that regardless of what they've done in their career, there's always room to grow and learn?
Well, that's a good question. I think that they know that once they're in front of me. I think it's very leveling once they're in front of me. I mean, I've had some of the biggest singers in the world, men, midlife, they've done it on their own the whole way. And now, oh crap, they've got muscle tension dysphonia. They've got a nodule. They've got a paralyzed vocal cord. They've got a hemorrhage. And they have to rehab their way back on stage. It's very leveling for them. And for them, for a grown man to come in, it's someone like Joe
Mhm.
and it brings them to their knees. They're like, well, it was different for Joe because he's not a singer and we had different work to do, but I rehabilitated him the way I would rehabilitate a singer. Joe's actually got a really nice voice.
He
Yeah.
Yeah,
does.
one of the best in the industry.
I know, and he wouldn't even sing in front of me when we first met. It was hilarious. And then he calls me like 8 years later and he goes, hey, I'm going to be on a TV show singing. And I was like, what? So you
That's
never know
awesome.
where you never know where you're going to go with it. But it is very leveling for a lot of people. And for me, I have to know who's in front of me. Am I training a 16-year-old? Do I have a 50-year-old man who's in trouble physically and emotionally right now? And how do I attack that? That's also like knowing your audience, right? Being able to read a room. I think that's
Mhm.
really important. But yeah, it's they understand it because they can't get through a scale. They're faking it in the song and they've got background vocals or tune on their track. They've got in the house, they have it tuned in the house. They have all these bells and whistles going on, but they can't just stand in front of a piano and sing. They're like, ugh, they don't know how to do it anymore because they've used all these other things that create them and make them handicapped. So what I do is I take them down to their most organic level, which is really leveling and really embarrassing and really you really have to put your ego to the side. They understand that they can't even get through a scale. They don't love it, but they get that they have to be there. And by the second or third lesson, they start seeing the little sprouts,
Mm.
and then they gain your trust, and then it's go time.
So,
Wow.
Valerie, I love to sing when I'm in the car, but how dangerous could it be if I really don't know what I'm doing?
Well, listen, if you're just doing it for fun, it's not really going to hurt you. But if you're singing, like Bad Omens or something, and or like Pierce the Veil or Blink 182, and
Hmm.
you're screaming at the top of your lungs on a high B as a man, and you don't know what you're doing, you could hemorrhage.
Definitely.
That
Not great. I mean, what it does is the vocal cord, the blood vessels in the cord, everybody's born with a different amount. So for some people are more susceptible than others, but the blood vessels in the cord, they swell. I had a client, first time this has happened to me in my career, never happened before. Really good singer, strong singer, knows how to use her mix, the whole nine. We don't even know what happened. The doctor, we were like scratching our heads, but she was at something in the evening and she was talking really loud. She said she was trying to talk over it because talking is worse than singing. It's very bad for the voice. And she was trying to cut through the noise. And I think she said she coughed or sneezed or something happened. And then she went to go say something and her voice
Mm.
went out. So
Wow.
she texted me and she was really upset. I said, go get scoped. She hemorrhaged.
ugh.
And
So you said,
Blood.
how long is that recovery?
It depends on the person, but usually we can get it where we need it to be in about 3 weeks.
so you said talking sometimes is worse for you than singing. How is that?
Mm, Another good question. So you can hear even my voice now. If you don't know me, I sound congested, right? My voice is not as clear as it normally is. And it's not that I just hung up with 4 clients, it's that I'm talking to you guys now. So this is like actually a really good learning tool to hear this. But because when you speak, it's very monotone. Vocal
Yeah.
cords are moving, but it's just kind of it's just
It's like
kind
in
of
one key.
correct. It's like
Hmm.
that's very hard on the voice because the strap muscles in the neck, they want to attack. When the cords start getting tired, the brain sends a message to the cords that they're tired, and the cords sends a message to the neck that they need help. And that's when you start struggling. When you're singing, you're coming from this pure place and everything's relaxed. You're like, ah,
Hmm.
that feels clear and easy for me. But then I start talking again and I can feel
Yeah.
pack. And that's why I don't love meet and greets for my artists because they're giving of so much energy. And then they have to talk to all these people pre and after they
After
just
the show.
show, and then they're just screwed the next day.
I never
So
thought about that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because, there's the four of us here talking into a microphone, just kind of going at our own tone. When you're in a room with other people talking, you got to raise your voice, talk louder. I need to do this. Can you hear me? Like, it's just such a different, way of dialogue, right? It just seems so, it'll strain your voice.
it will, and even like yelling. So I have an actor that I'm working with right now who's doing a big play on the West End, and it's a huge role, and there's a lot of yelling in it, right? And he just came off a cold, and so it's teaching them where to put that in the solar plexus in the rib cage, right? It's where to put the voice when you're yelling to protect the vocal cords from the pressure, right? From the grabbing and all of that. And so it is tricky. But I have singers that are bartenders. I'm like, you got to quit that job. I
Right.
mean, you're just
That's
talking
funny.
over it. And then they go and they try to sing the next day and they're worse for the wear. I mean, I'll tell you,
Wow.
when I went to high school, I was like, oh, I was always athletic, wanted to do something. Like, well, maybe what are the sports I can do with singing? So I don't know where I got in my head that I was going to cheer. So dumb. I look back on it now. What would I even want to do? Nothing wrong with cheerleading. Trust me. It was just really the antithesis of my personality. But I thought, oh, I'll try out for the squad. And you're yelling all the time, right? But you're not
Yep.
singing. So my
Yeah.
instructor came to me because I was in the chamber choir as a freshman, remember? I was
Hmm.
15 with a bunch of 17, 18-year-olds. And my conductor and my choral director came to me one day and he said, I've got a question for you. And he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? You want to be a cheerleader? You want to sing? I said, well, I would want to sing. And he goes, pick the squad.
That's funny.
Mhm.
And I
So
did.
when one of your artists finishes a show, like similar to working out, you have recovery, sauna, cold plunges. What are some recovery methods you have them do after a show?
A lot of people try to do these cool downs. I think after a show, if you just want to do just very lightly for maybe a minute, that's fine. I don't really do cool downs with artists for a couple of reasons. I think when you're done playing the sport, you just stop. Maybe to go take
Yeah.
a hot shower. Maybe it's time to ice your leg or your knee, but you're just kind of done. You're
But
not
and
going to go back out.
you still
Go
have
ahead.
the adrenaline too from performing.
Yeah, you have the adrenaline, and so you need to go back in the green room or whatever and take a few minutes to kind of calm yourself down, have some tea, be in a quiet room.
Hmm.
If it's just for a few minutes, just to kind of gain that talking. Excuse me. Sometimes if you have meet and greets, you're talking, it's still kind of heavy on the voice. So I think the less you can do with the voice after a show, the better. You just
Okay.
stop talking, cool it down. I also find that vocal coaches will do that because they're really hyped up from the show and everybody wants a piece of the artist after the show. So the vocal coach likes to be in there and, feel important. And so they cool their artist down. I'm
Yeah.
just not of that ilk. Like, I want to go home. They want to go home.
Hmm.
Let's go home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
I don't want to be there in their face any more than I need to be. I don't need to be that for them. I'm there to support them. I'm not there to feel important or take a bunch of photos backstage. That's opposite of what I need to be doing. Right? And I always tell my teachers that they trust you. I don't care if the MD threw some ratchet video they took on their phone up on their story. I don't care if everybody on the team did it. I don't care if the guitar tech did it. They shouldn't do it. Shame on them. And for two reasons. The artist might not want to tell them they're uncomfortable with it. Or management might not want to tell them they're uncomfortable. The artist might say, yeah, that's fine, but really they're uncomfortable. So always err on the side of caution. I don't have a lot of photos up with artists on my page. That's for a reason. If people saw the stuff I was doing all the time, I don't get those photos very often. Because you put yourself, it's not great for business, but it is. That's the long game because you get a reputation and people trust you. But if you're snapping photos backstage to get them on your page to like help your business, that's not sustainable either. Because then I've seen coaches fired because of that. They've come back
Wow.
and said, "Oh, I had this person, but they were snapping too many photos backstage," and that is
It's a
definitely not.
little immature.
Well, it's very
Yeah.
sure it's very self-serving, and you can never be doing anything as a teacher to piggyback on the artist. It's a
Hmm.
little bit different for like the hair and makeup because they're taking photos of the person with their hair
Yeah.
and makeup. So they found a loophole.
Yeah.
I always find that the makeup artists are just flooded with photos and fashion because they
Hmm.
they photograph the outfit. They have a reason to be taking a photo. A vocal coach doesn't, and so we don't really get to advertise and do it in a clean way. So coming full circle, not running off on too much of a tangent. I like to kind of disappear after the show and let them just be with their friends and family and cool and calm down.
So
Awesome.
Valerie, in your line of work, what's an average lesson look like? Is it always in person? Do you have a studio that they come to? Do you go to them? Is it online ever?
Great question. So I do have a studio. I have a studio out here in Studio City, and I've had a space for probably 20 years.
Nice.
I used to teach there all the time, but I have two other teachers that teach there now. I recently, during COVID, moved out to Calabasas, and I don't go in because the honest answer is I don't have to. Like people are driving to me. I'm just blown away.
Oh.
It's another 20 minutes on their drive to get out
Hmm.
here, kind of on the cusp of
Yep.
Malibu.
Hmm.
Um, but they come out to my home and I've got these beautiful high ceilings and this beautiful space downstairs. I'm up in my office right now. It's a beautiful space to sing in. It's very calming. It's the air is clear. It's just people feel very calm out here.
Yeah.
It's a really nice space to have them in. And it is hard for them to get out here, but the majority of my clients that like in person, they'll drive for 45 minutes to come see me. I have people that come from Orange County.
Oh,
They'll
wow.
Wow.
Broward, San Diego, Palm Springs, Ventura County. So they'll drive, but the majority of my lessons are FaceTime. And the reason that is because I have so many tours and there's only one of me. I could have tours in UK, China, Thailand, Dubai, here. So we're working with multiple time zones. So FaceTime's the only way that I can plug in with my clients and see them before a show and like boom, 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 get to everybody. So
Hmm.
we do all of it.
That's
And when you
so
say
interesting.
tour, do you mean like on tour with some of your clients, or what kind of tour are you referring to?
So, what I'll do is I'll prep a tour. I'm their vocal coach, so I vocal produce in the studio if they want me to
Hmm.
with the producer, and I'll help produce the record. I
Cool.
also live produce where I have in-ears and I have a pack and I go to their shows and their rehearsals and I listen to their vocal and I take
Wow.
notes, what worked, what didn't, and why, where did they struggle and how can we fix it? So we'll do notes after the show. And so I go in and I vocal produce their live performance. Maybe a week, we have a sound stage rented out for a few weeks. I do the rehearsal. Then I travel with them maybe for 2 or 3 shows, not all my artists, but the big ones that need the assistance, want the assistance.
Hmm.
And then I'm out in like 2 weeks. And then we finish the tour. They'll have, a tour for like 6 months. I hop on FaceTime 4 or 5 days a week with them and I warm them up before their shows.
Wow. And
Cool.
Valerie, if you're comfortable sharing, who are some of the artists you work with? Just so our
So
listeners can know.
yeah, so I work with Sam Smith, who, by the way, shameless plug, wrote my foreword of my book. So if your viewers don't have it, thank you. I
There
love
it is.
it. We're gonna all have our
There we
book.
go.
Come
Right?
on.
We got to get a still shot of that for me.
We'll
But
screenshot it for sure.
Sam, if I open it up here, that you've seen the inside, Sam wrote my foreword,
I read that. It was beautiful.
beautiful foreword. And you know, it's just a nice tool to have, right? To be able to be an author and to write all those things down. But these artists they tour all year round. They've got like 100
Hmm.
shows. So it's very, very taxing on the voice and very athletic. And so again, just coming full circle, it's really about giving them that tour support, right? And that means working on weekends. And so I work with Olivia Rodrigo, I work with Lainey Wilson. Um, some of the other ones are on my site. I did the Oscars with Ryan Gosling last year. I had 9 days to get him ready. I could
That's
not have been more
wow.
proud. That was a huge undertaking, a lot of choreography, and you're taking an actor that sings, not a singer.
True.
I don't know if you guys caught it, but the entire room was on their feet. I think we even heard that Steven Spielberg said it was the best performance he's seen at the Oscars in like 30 plus years.
Wow.
Wow.
So what I do is I get singers where they need to be really fast. I get through the ego, I get through the fear, and I get right into what we need to do and start rebuilding them from this tiny little thing, and we start building out, right? And so that takes a lot of trust, by the way. I did the TV show Nashville, which you wouldn't remember. It's probably too old now, but it was we had a bunch of characters on that. I did the Eyes of Tammy Faye with Jessica Chastain. That was a really fun project. I did Lucifer for 6 years, so Tom Ellis,
Wow.
entire cast. I did something called The High Note with Kelvin Harris Jr., Leslie Ann Ross, and Dakota Johnson, but Kelvin was my client. I've worked with a lot of heavy metal bands. I've worked with rappers. I work with some of the greats, Rascal Flatts, Emmylou Harris, if you remember Emmylou, she's
Absolutely.
been around forever. Um, who else can I mention? Sia, Gracie Abrams, who's huge right now. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes on and on. If you go to my
Love
client, it just will knock you in the face. A lot of actors, Josh Brolin, Dennis Quaid, Andy Garcia, they're all greats. They're all like Jeff Bridges, they're
Oh
Yes.
all
yeah.
now, but you know, getting them where they need to be really fast. A lot of legacy people like Jason Sheff, who was in the band Chicago back in the 80s,
Wow.
all the way to, our top artists now. So everything from opera to metal.
Well, that's so cool. Um, so Valerie, by many measures, you've lived an extraordinary life. What advice would you give to those listening who aim to do the same?
Um, Again, I'm going full circle to what I said earlier is pick something that you love and really go after it. I always find people in this business that wear too many hats. They come in and they they want to impress whomever. And so they come in as the, you know, movement person or whatever their role is. And then they're doing costuming and they're weighing in on the set, and then they might be weighing in on the music or the singing. It's like you can't do that. Like stay in your lane.
Hmm.
You also create more problems for you when you do that because then you've got more people coming to you. And then if something goes wrong, you're the one they're mad at. So I always tell, like, be confident in what you're doing, stay in your lane, do your job, and do it really, really well. And a lot of that advice really, again, not to harp, but to go back to the book, but one of the reasons that I wrote it, it wasn't to sell books or making money. No authors make any money unless you're like J.K. Rowling's or you're a huge celebrity, right? It's a loss. It was a passion project, and for me, I was so annoyed at what was going on in my industry, what was going on with these singers and all the misinformation. It was actually quite angry. I was
Yeah.
writing, and we shelved it because COVID hit. But then we shelved it for a few years. When my editor got her hands on it, she goes, "Man, this information's so great, but it's a bit angry." So I ended up taking my journalism degree, which I never thought that I would, and I put it on paper, and we published this, I think, amazing book that is a story about singers. It's not a boring book about anatomy. Nobody wants to read that. I don't want to read that. I'm asleep by chapter one, but I wanted to kind of do like what Anthony Bourdain did with cooking. I wanted to string these fantastic stories of these people, and I wanted the audience to really be able to guess who it might be, because it's like one or two people that you think it probably could be. And then I wanted all the titles and the quotes to be my singers that contributed to the book, that were so kind to say, yes, you can put me in there. Absolutely. And so I think it's just taking your passions in life and being really, really good at what you do. And always keep learning. Don't ever get to a point where you think, oh, well, your podcast only has X amount. I've been doing it for 15 years and I've got millions of people. Like, don't tell me what I'm doing wrong. I think that's a big mistake. I think a lot of the bad stuff you're getting, you can throw out. I have teachers come on all the time because they're SLPs and they think they know everything. And you know what? I just very calmly school them and say, I'm glad that you have a PhD and I'm glad that you have you're an SLP at 28 years old. Good for you, dude. I love that for you. But you don't have the boots on the ground and you have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to singers. So you should probably open up your mind a little bit more and continue your education and surround yourself by people who've been doing it longer.
Well said.
Amazing.
Stay open. Always stay open.
Gotta be open.
And Valerie, before we go, if there's a couple things you'd have to tell the listeners about vocal health, the main things. People talk honey, gargling with salt water, drinking a lot of water. What's like your top 5 for vocal health?
Vocal rest,
Okay.
voice rest, hands down. People always ask me, what do I eat? They've had teachers come to them saying, don't eat dairy, don't have coffee, no. Everything in life is balance. Everything. People are like, oh, I shouldn't work out because of my neck. No, I'm a runner, I'm a lifter. I think if you're trained properly, you can turn the right and the wrong muscles on. But again, it's the talking thing that we talked about. You've got to rest the vocal cords because when you're talking, they keep slapping up against each other and they never get a rest. And the vocal cords are the one muscle in the body that doesn't hurt when there's a problem. You just feel tired and know there's something wrong. If I twist my ankle or I break my ankle or my foot, I know it's broken and I'm going to stay off of it. But the vocal cords, you can have a major injury and you're not actually in pain. You're just like something's wrong, right? And so you have to really get that before it starts. So vocal rest, vocal rest, vocal rest is my number one. That's no talking for like maybe 2 days. Everything's on texting, email. Don't talk to me. I go on voice rest. My family knows I'm vocal rest from 2 in the afternoon till 10 the next day. They know not to talk to me. They know they're not going to get an answer back.
Okay,
Just on voice
amazing.
rest. That would be the number one thing. I would say just don't have a milkshake before you go on stage. You know what I mean? And eat like a big bowl of pasta. Just eat something light. Try to eat healthy and eat balanced. I like a little bit of throat coat, but the licorice root can dry you out.
Okay.
Not too much of that, like maybe a cup or 2 with some honey. You could just do regular chamomile tea and honey, lukewarm, a lot of water, hydrate, 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 and then maybe like a little handheld vaporizer that you can breathe in is really good. Beyond that, sleep, water, low stress, vocal rest.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
Amazing. Well, Valerie, I love this conversation. I learned so much. Love what you're doing. Love your book. And the book was more, like you said, it was not boring. It was more of a, life kind of lesson or teaching than it was just this, fact, stat. It wasn't like that. So I highly recommend A Better Voice to all of you listening.
Guys.
Thank you so much, Valerie, for joining the show.
You can
Before
get
we
it
wrap up,
on
where can
Amazon.
Amazon? I was going to say, where can everyone find you and your work?
Yes, so you can find me on Instagram at official Val Morehouse. So that's the first thing. You can also go to my website, which is valeriemorehouse.com. VALERIEMOREHOUSE.com. And then you can buy my book on Amazon. You can also find me on bettervoice.co, where you can learn more about the vocal trainer. So those are all the places that you can go to find out where I'm at and what I'm doing. And you'll also you have the back of the book up there.
Yep.
A lot of quotes from your favorite people. We've got Harvey, who's the CEO of the Recording Academy. We've got a lot of the MDs, which are the ear, nose, and throat surgeons that I work with, have put their names in my book, which is big because a lot of doctors don't want to do that. So for them to endorse someone like me is a huge undertaking, and I'm very blessed that they have trust in me to add them to the project. But that is where you can find me.
Terrific.
Beautiful.
Valerie, thank you so much. Wishing
Welcome.
you continued success.
Thank you, Valerie.
Nice to chat with you guys. Take it
Bye.
easy.